Hey guys. This is What If Naruto the Last Movie Never Happened. Hit like and subscribe if you like this one, and also please check the author in the description. Let's start. Chapter 7: Convincing Naruto. Shikamaru sighed, already dreading what he knew was going to be a difficult discussion with Naruto. Though he understood his own role and the rest of his friends during these missions, convincing Naruto to fulfill his responsibility might pose some problems. They were in the office and Kakashi had his seat turned around. He was gazing out the window, waiting for Naruto to answer his summons. Shikamaru asked the Hokage, "You really think we can convince him to do this? Is it even right to send him so far away from Konoha? He's been alone most of his life, and we're asking him to leave the home he loves so much to travel abroad for a long time. He'll be away from friends, from the people he knows best, just to travel to places he knows nothing about. He'll be a stranger to everyone he meets. It's a lot to ask him, don't you think?" Kakashi was quiet, his gaze still fixed outside. "I still think it might be too early for him to go on these missions. He shouldered a lot during the war. Don't you think he needs more of a break, Hokage-sama?" "Shikamaru, you're worried for no reason. It's been 2 years. Plus, this is Naruto we're talking about," Kakashi finally said. But he turned around and looked at Shikamaru. "I understand how you feel, but yes, he needs to go because he needs to see the world. The world isn't just Konoha. If he wants to become Hokage, he needs to understand what's it like to build up a lasting peace, to work with other people different from him. This will be his most important mission." Shikamaru nodded slowly, finally accepting Kakashi's decision. The Hokage continued reassuring him. "Besides, he won't be completely alone all the time. He'll be with others because I want everyone to see that the sacrifices we've all made was worth it. Your father, Ino's father, Niji. Other people from other villages have also lost their shinobi, too." He smiled at Shikamaru. "Have faith in Naruto. He'll understand." They heard a sudden ruckus outside, heard long strides and purposeful steps, then Naruto burst into the office without knocking. He strode in, uncaring of protocol, then stopped in front of the Hokage's desk. He laid a scroll on top. "Yo, Hokage," he said with a grin. "I've come to report that Ishibashi village has completed the new wells you've ordered dug. 3 new ones are now providing water to all of the people. The village sends you their thanks." Kakashi sighed. "How many times have I told you to knock before entering the office, Naruto?" Shikamaru shook his head. "Naruto, it's called common courtesy. You should try it sometime. You're such a pain in the ass." "Unbelievable." Yeah, Naruto said with a yawn. "I've heard this so many times that this is getting boring." But he saw their serious faces and instantly knew something was different today. "Okay, Shikamaru, Hokage-sama, I apologize. I was just excited to be back in Konoha and to see you guys again. I haven't been home in a week. I didn't think it would take that long to complete this mission." He rubbed the back of his head and gave a self-conscious laugh. "I know it's strange and I've only been gone a few days, but I love coming back and seeing the gates, the Hokage stone faces, Ichiraku. I missed home." Shikamaru grinned suddenly. He looked at Kakashi with a raised brow. "Okay, Hokage-sama. Good luck convincing him then." Kakashi shook his head at his assistant, then leaned back in his chair. He deepened his voice, inflecting it with seriousness to make Naruto understand. "Naruto, I'm kicking you out of Konoha for a couple of years. You're going to travel to other villages and learn how to build peace. You can come back to the village every few months. It's a super extra S-class mission." "Really?" Naruto said with excitement. "Super extra S-class mission? When do I start?" Kakashi looked at Shikamaru. "Easy as pie." "That was unfair," Shikamaru grumbled when Naruto left the room. Kakashi laughed. "Shikamaru! You're just going to have to recognize a master at handling Naruto. When it comes to him, you just mention the word Hokage and S-class and he'll usually do it." Shikamaru responded with his own chuckle. "Yeah, I never doubted you for a second. He trusts you. We all trust you." Kakashi continued smiling, but his glance quickly flitted up to the ceiling. He then gave a nod at his assistant. Okay, I'll leave the rest to you then, Shikamaru. They'll all give you their plans and you can give them more of the details of what we want them to accomplish. Sure, Hokage-sama. Just leave it to me, Shikamaru said as he walked out of the room. Alright, I guess I need to go get some air, too, Kakashi said a few minutes later into the empty room. He was waiting for him outside, leaning a hip against the balcony, his arms folded, gazing up at the faces on the rock, lingering on the face of the fourth. Hokage habits already. Kakashi smiled at his own private joke. I guess you needed to hear more than just super extra S-class mission, huh? You're allowed to have your fun, sometimes, Hokage, Naruto said with a brief smile. I'll do it, of course, because you asked me to, and this seems very important to you and for Konoha. I'll do my duty. Kakashi gazed at Naruto unblinkingly. Think of it as another step on the path to becoming Hokage. Knowing you and Shikamaru, there's always a legitimate reason why you guys are doing this, so I understand that part. The look Naruto flashed Kakashi next was hesitant. I'm just not sure if I'll be able to learn everything that you guys want me to. Doubts from you? That's very rare, Kakashi said. Naruto was quiet as he thought about it for a moment. Not doubts, I think. He then glanced at Kakashi with a candid smile. Just uncertainty about the future. Kakashi's eyes glimmered with respect. Good. He was man enough to admit it. Up to this point, I've been dealing with the shinobi world, training, fighting, enduring, moving on. The single focus has been war and surviving. This is all I've known since I was 8. But I think from here on out, my life is going to change, isn't it? Naruto asked. Kakashi only nodded. The younger shinobi continued. I just wanted to make sure that we're on the same page. Kakashi-sensei, I'm going to be dealing with a lot of things that I've never encountered before, aren't I? Correct. Naruto sighed. Okay, that's it then. Kakashi stood where he was, looking at the man Naruto had become. Taller now, taller even than him. More mature than he would ever admit, too, but Kakashi had no cause to worry. The mischief always lurked behind the seriousness. It was never going to leave him, it was just in Naruto's nature. He smiled inwardly as he remembered the 12-year-old boy he'd inflicted with 1,000 years of pain jutsu. Can't do that anymore, he thought with a chuckle. Naruto glanced at him, but Kakashi didn't say anything. Instead, they both looked up at the stone faces again. I miss my dad. I wish I'd had more time with him. Kakashi smiled. Yes, Naruto. Me too. Minato-sensei was a fine example of what a man should be. And I miss Jiraiya too. Naruto grinned, thinking of the worst example of what a man should be. But after a moment, the memory of his father and Jiraiya affected him differently. He felt a sudden spasm in his heart. There it was, the sweep of grief that never seemed to leave him. He took a moment to let it flow through him, then he breathed out the sadness. Naruto nodded after a while and finally said, Shame we both lost our fathers and our masters when we were so young. I wish they were here with us. I think they would have loved to see Konoha and our times so peaceful now. They really would. Naruto continued, There are so many things I wanted to ask them, but I have to figure out this whole being a man thing on my own. Hey now. You're not completely on your own yet. Last time I looked, I'm a man. I'm still here, aren't I? Kakashi said. Naruto made a face at him. I just don't trust advice from a guy who claims Aika Paradise as his favorite book. One of these days, you'll open your eyes and recognize that book as an amazing work of genius. As Naruto traveled outside of Konoha, sometimes with other members tasked to these missions, but mostly on his own, he learned the different ways villages did things, the way they treated their people, and how cultures affected their thinking processes. Mostly, though, Naruto discovered that while he might have the capacity to forgive and forget, not everyone else did. Kakashi had been right about the delicate state of the peace they were slowly settling into. It could fracture at any time. He saw clearly that letting go wasn't as easy for other people. Other people held on to grudges and let it fester. He'd forgotten that not everyone was shinobi and not everyone could always endure. He understood now why Kakashi had forced him out to explore not only the world but to learn the difficulties in leading people, both shinobi and civilians alike. Of course, Naruto himself had known the destructive consequences of holding on to hate. But he'd seen more through other people's eyes, too. Villages that were not so strong, but still caught up in history created by past generations of war had suffered. War orphans, children, and women, those who needed to be protected, were severely affected when fathers, mothers, sons, daughters, brothers, and sisters died in war. Even now, Naruto wanted to tear his hair out in frustration. He was in the middle of a mission, chasing a man who'd attacked the village he'd been visiting on this trip. What is it about people that made them hold on to their hurts and grievances? The war was over, why hang on to the things that made life so hard to bear? But it seemed as if it was hard to give up the hate when that's all you've known all your life. He just didn't understand it, couldn't understand it. He tore through the woods and villages, turning on his QB mode and asking Kurama to help him carry this load. Every time he turned it on, he remembered Kakashi's words about people wanting to help him at every step of the way. It made him feel better to have this stalwart ally with him everywhere he went. "Thanks, Kurama," he said to the beast. "Humph. No need to thank me. It's our power," came the fox's reply. Naruto chuckled. He'd sensed the beast's spurt of pleasure before Kurama had quickly hidden it. He flew, covering the distance in an instant. The attacker's kunais didn't even hit him. He extended his QB arms and caught the attacker just as he was about to send out an exploding scroll. He sensed the attacker's frustration as he held him with Kurama's chakra. "Why is he here?" was the thought that circled through the man's mind. Naruto could feel the confusion. "I'm here to help you guys sort out your problems. I don't understand why you're still warring over this piece of land," Naruto said to the man. "Because it was ours first. We were the first settlers in this area. Are you siding with the other village, then? How fair is that?" "I'm not siding with anyone. I'm here to figure out what the reason is, why you guys are still fighting when all we want is peace," Naruto answered back as calmly as he could. It wouldn't help to antagonize the man. "Peace," the man scoffed. "Easy for you guys to say in Konoha. You guys were the ones who caused all of this in the first place." Naruto swallowed his irritation. Again the same argument. Here he was trying to right the wrongs, to lend a helping hand, but everyone was being so stubborn and inflexible with their thinking. He understood now why the Hokage had sent everyone out to do these missions. Once the cause for unity disbanded, self-interest and selfishness took over. He could appreciate now how Itachi had felt, weighing the common good versus individual wants. The decision to go up against his clan to save Konoha had not been made lightly. But he had to try. "Look, I'm not trying to stir the pot. I'm just here to listen to everyone. To all the sides, not just one. I didn't attack you guys. You came and ambushed me even though I'm all alone. I'm not mad. I want to help you all." The man spat. "You can help by telling them to get off our land." Naruto sighed, but he held on to the man anyway. He quickly found the man's allies and Kurama's power helped disarm and capture all of them. 6 men from the neighboring area had come to disrupt the farmers from tilling the land, had caused damage to the storefronts, and planted bombs that could explode at any time. Those damages, Naruto quickly rectified. The hard part was getting everyone to just talk about the issues. "Don't worry, I'm here to protect you guys too," Naruto reassured all of them as he carried them with Kurama's chakra into a room filled with angry villagers. He increased the intensity of his power, making it known to everyone that he wasn't going to let anyone hurt these captured men. After everyone settled into their places, Naruto released the men he'd rounded up but kept them protected within his power. This time, though, he cloaked everyone in the room in his chakra. He wanted everyone to feel connected, to feel the same thoughts. But the thoughts swirling throughout the room were angry and filled with hate. "Okay, now we're all going to talk. Just talk. We're going to listen to each other and see what's bothering everyone." Naruto smiled as reassuringly as he could at the villagers and the antagonists. He really hoped he could make everyone understand each other. "But before we do that, I want everyone to close their eyes and think of the people they love. Think of them smiling and reaching out to you, he said. The atmosphere changed as he felt their thoughts flow through his chakra. It was friendlier and less intense. Naruto breathed a sigh of relief. Chapter 8: Searching for an Emissary. Meanwhile, Shikamaru had been trying to rack his brains as to who'd be able to do the diplomatic missions, the more delicate task of talking to different factions among the villages and representing Konoha's interests abroad. As Kakashi's assistant, he was more than willing to do it. But it was too much for one person. He needed someone else to conduct these types of assignments. Naruto was the first one he scratched off his list. Shikamaru could still remember the ruckus he'd created in the Hokage's office as he complained about the mission he'd just come back from. "Please don't send me again to these villages where there are so many young ninjas," he'd shouted. "They always chase and scratch me, Hokage. I don't want to deal with teenage fangirls anymore. It was not an S-class mission. Don't make me call you a liar." Hinata was off the list too, and he didn't bother talking to her. She was just too damn shy. She wouldn't be able to handle it, surrounded by so many people and having to negotiate on Konoha's behalf with confidence. Shikamaru had taken one look at Kiba bounding up on Akamaru and decided no. There was no way he'd be able to conduct politics either. He was too loud and brash, and just as bad as Naruto. Maybe Shino? He had the temperament for it. "What do you think? You think you can help me out?" Shikamaru asked after explaining the situation. He was met by the sound of crickets, literally. Shino held up a clear box filled with the jumping insects. "Sorry, Shikamaru, but I've got other priorities. I'm using this travel abroad to discover more insects for my clan and to talk to people who have the same type of skills as ours." "Why?" "Because the more insect users, the merrier." Sakura quickly shook her head at his approach. "I don't have the patience to deal with people squabbling over things I don't care about. Plus, I want to learn more medical jutsu when I'm abroad. I'm best suited for that type of work. There are a lot of techniques I can learn from other villages and bring back to Konoha to build up the medical corps here." Sai was smiling his fake smile at him when he approached. It could work. He was former root. He was cool under pressure and had an excellent poker face, Shikamaru thought hopefully, until Sai whipped out a book and started flipping through the pages. "I need to check my book first." So at these meetings with leaders, the first thing to do is to smile, then shake hands, then greetings. "What do you say for a greeting, though?" Sai thought for a moment, then said, "Yo, man, how's it going?" Lee looked at him with his big round eyes, and Shikamaru knew this wasn't going to work, either. Yes, he was very intelligent and astute, but Lee was too open and easy to read. He wouldn't be able to finesse around difficult issues. Hell, he'd probably give away Konoha's secrets and riches in a heartbeat. But Tenten could do it. She laughed in his face. "No, thanks. I want to grow my business, so my goal is to check out the market and the competition in other villages. I've already got so many contacts and business partners. They're coming next month to check out what we have in Konoha. It's great." She gave him a wry look. "Besides, you really think I can keep my cool when the talk turns to arms and weapons?" Ino would have been perfect with her flirty and outgoing personality, but she'd been very subdued since the death of her father. She smiled at him in sympathy. "I wish I can help you, Shikamaru. But I'm only doing the bare minimum of these missions outside of Konoha because the Hokage asked, and it's to help Naruto in the future. Truthfully though, I'd like to stay here in the village as much as I can. I want to be with my mom. We still have the flower shop to run, too." He didn't want to pressure her. Chuji would be too concerned about the food instead of focusing on anything political. Shikamaru smiled. He wouldn't be able to concentrate if he was hungry, and Chuji was hungry all the time. Plus, he seemed to be spending more time traveling to and staying at Kumo. He was still racking his brain when Hinata approached him. "I'd like to do the missions, Shikamaru," she said. A few minutes later, there was a smile on his normally indolent face after talking with her. He was whistling as he was heading back to the Hokage's office to tell him about the deal he'd just done with Hinata. He'd been surprised when Hinata had approached him at first and volunteered to go on these types of missions. He'd agreed to her plan immediately, seeing the merits of her argument. Both of them came from powerful clans, and he understood the type of maneuvering that she'd had to go through in dealing with hers. His steps, however, slowed. Wait a minute, he thought, as he suddenly realized that it was she who had outmaneuvered him. Hinata had used her voice, keeping it low so he could lean down and hear her better. She'd smiled at him with such a sweet expression on her face that he didn't feel like he could deny her anything. She touched his arm when she asked her questions, making Shikamaru feel like he'd done something naughty for having her lay her hand there. Then she'd laid the final blow to her arguments in trying to persuade him. Shikamaru, I'm just quiet. But I think I can really do good just by listening to people and getting to the heart of the problem. And I'm not shy around everyone, just letting the sentence trail off for him to make his own conclusions. There had been just a perfect amount of uncertainty in her voice to make him feel bad and feel like wanting to please her. Shit, he thought with sudden respect. She was perfect. Women! Shikamaru shook his head. Such pains in the ass, but he had to hand it to her. Hinata had surprised him. A week later, 2 sets of shinobi were exchanging greetings at the outer entrance of the village. Bye, Hinata! Don't miss me too much! Naruto yelled cheerfully and waved at her as he and his team stepped through the gates of Konoha. He turned to Ino and Tenten. Ladies, don't drag me down during this mission. We're going to be together for a while, so you better keep up. Tenten, hold him down while I stuff my kunai down his throat, came Ino's angry screech. Ino, I'm only joking. Of course. He was always joking. But Hinata had felt a flutter in her heart at his parting words. She would miss him, while he was just being normal about life. Beside her, Sakura smiled with sympathy. So dense, she muttered. Shino gave her a pat on the arm. She smiled at them. I'm fine, guys. We're just friends, after all. Nothing to worry about. Sakura only pursed her lips. Shino looked at her impassively. Okay, if you say so, Sakura finally said. But her tone indicated she didn't believe her. So he's off again. 2 months in Kiri and the area around the village, he said, right? Yes, Hinata said. They all started walking towards the Hokage's tower. They had to hand in their reports. Sakura, Shino, and Hinata had just gotten back from their mission and had met Naruto's team as they were heading out. She'd seen the excitement in his eyes. It looked like he was enjoying himself as he traveled far. She, meanwhile, was waiting for Shikamaru and the Hokage's go-ahead before she could go off on her own. She was anxious, but she wanted to know what it was like, why Naruto always seemed happy enough to head out on these missions. But she wasn't surprised. These last 2 years he'd been in demand. Lady Tsunade and Sakura had made sure he was properly training with his arm. When they'd finally declared he didn't need any more rehabilitation, Kakashi and Shikamaru had sent him on local missions where the leaders got a boost of morale from Naruto's presence. The rebuilding of Konoha had gone more smoothly as everyone benefited from his cheerful and encouraging company. She, meanwhile, had been happy enough to watch him recover from his injuries and also from the emotional toll of the war. After their heart-to-heart conversation at Niji's grave, he'd been true to his word and had treated her as a friend. He'd teased her the same way he teased all their friends. They'd even shared meals together at Ichiraku. While she'd been able to act normally around him, had even become comfortable in his presence, her feelings for him sometimes got in the way. It still prevented her from being completely at ease with him. But she'd hidden it well from him. To him, she was just a friend who would always support and believe in him. Unfortunately, Naruto still remained completely and utterly ignorant of love. Their situation seemed hopeless. Hinata grinned to herself. But she was fine with it. It wasn't in her nature to push, so she was willing to wait. Plus, she felt like something was lacking in her being, something beyond her love for him and her life in Konoha. Maybe she would discover what it was in the next phase of her career. Her conversation with Shikamaru had made her feel excited. She was still surprised that she'd taken the initiative and broached the subject with him when she'd heard about his search for an emissary. It had seemed interesting and something she felt she could do. Maybe this would finally help her discover what she could be truly capable of. Shikamaru and Kakashi met them at the Hokage's office with a smile. After giving their reports, Shino and Sakura left. Hinata, wait up, Shikamaru said before she could turn away and head out. She nodded at him as the two closed the door. Of course, she answered and waited. Kakashi was considering her with an appreciative gleam in his eyes. I have to say that I'm glad you're going to be doing this, Hinata. And that you decided to do it on your own. Hinata blushed. Thank you, Hokage-sama. I'm just grateful for the chance to prove myself to you. He laughed. You have nothing to prove to me. But this will be a challenge for yourself. Yeah, Shikamaru said. We're going to rely on your hidden talents to make sure we can build a world worth fighting for. Hinata felt the weight of their words settle in her heart. She smiled luminously at them and borrowed one of Naruto's favorite lines when she said, "Leave it to me." And she'd been the perfect emissary. She'd thrown herself willingly into these diplomatic missions. Kakashi and Shikamaru had utilized her skills and asked her to travel to places beyond Konoha, where she spent months away from home, away from the pressures of the Hyuga clan. Hinata finally found a way to shine. Chapter 9: A Visit Home. A few more months into these special missions, they'd all run into each other at home. Kiba, Ino, Naruto, Sai, Sakura, and Hinata suddenly found themselves greeting each other at the gates of Konoha. Everyone! It's been a while since we've been together like this, Ino cried. She hooked an arm around Sakura and Hinata's shoulders, then looked at the boys with delight. Why don't we all go to Yakiniku for dinner? We can all catch up there. Naruto folded his arms. What about Ichiraku? No, Ino said as they all started walking in the direction of the barbecue restaurant. If you want to go, you can go by yourself. Hinata fell back and walked beside Naruto. She smiled at him. Maybe next time, Naruto? He grinned at her. Yup. Somehow, at the restaurant, Naruto ended up sitting between Ino and Sakura, who were already bantering with each other. Hinata sat across from them at the table, talking to Kiba about her latest trip to IWA. Occasionally, her eyes flicked to the three on the opposite side as she observed the way Sakura and Ino leaned into Naruto, over him, and had their arms and chest pressed up against his arms. Of course, everyone was drinking, but she suspected that those two would be doing the same thing even if alcohol wasn't involved. She envied their personalities, both of them so outgoing, fun, and confident. The comfortable way they touched Naruto indicated that they thought of him as just a friend. She wished she could someday find the courage to be comfortable and easy with him like that, the way they did. But Ino and Sakura had grown up in normal families, had never had the experience of being mercilessly trained by a tyrant of a father, who admittedly, now was doing his best to mend his ways. Ino, they have this particular type of surgical knife at Sunna, Sakura was saying, her voice dripping with envy and desire. She sighed as she looked at her hand, imagining the feel of the blade when she'd held it. It cuts through bone with just a single slice, all without requiring the medic to use chakra. Her arm was resting on Naruto's shoulder, the other hand was now lifting her drink to her lips. Ino brightened. Naruto was looking queasy. Do we need to talk about cutting flesh while we're eating meat? Hinata smiled, but she became pensive again as she marveled at the difference between her and the two women sitting across from her. She sighed. She guessed it was just the result of growing up a Hyuga, under the stern, watchful eyes of not only her father, but the entire clan. The kidnapping attempt by Kumo when she was younger had been a source of uneasiness for her family. It had led to the death of her uncle Hizashi and had been a blow to the Hyuga pride. After that, they had smothered her with overprotectiveness, treating her like a fragile princess, robbing her of confidence and self-worth. She was made to feel that she needed to be protected all the time, which contributed greatly to her shyness and anxiety. When Naruto had come into her life, it was the first time she'd felt that she could change her situation. She'd watched him work relentlessly to fight against the hardships of his life, and had wanted that same drive for herself. Then Neji had become her ally after his fight with Naruto. And she'd loved Neji for acknowledging her worth as a shinobi instead of someone weak who'd always needed protection from others. He'd seen her potential and had supervised her training. Hinata! Huh! She blinked and she saw that everyone was looking at her. Naruto had called her name. Yo, you still with us, Hinata? Kiba said. Sorry, she said with a sheepish smile. I was just thinking. Hinata, are you okay? Shikamaru's not driving you too hard with these missions, is he? Ino asked her with genuine concern. Her eyes suddenly flashed with displeasure. Let me know if he's bothering you so I can talk to him. Hinata grinned at her. Thanks, Ino, but it's not that. Shikamaru and the Hokage have both been very supportive. I'm enjoying myself. I love getting to travel and seeing other places. Ino and Sakura looked at each other, then at her. They both nodded. Ino smiled. Okay, if you say so. But do let us know if it gets too much. I will. Hinata smiled at Ino. Naruto was in the middle of popping food into his mouth. His chopsticks paused mid-air as he looked at Hinata in surprise. He'd heard from everyone that she'd been constantly traveling herself, and had been spending months away from Konoha. He looked at her. Wait, what kind of missions are you doing, Hinata? Hinata was about to answer, but Sakura beat her to it. Sakura put down her drink with a thunk on the table. I already told you the last time I saw you. She's doing negotiations, brokering peace among the smaller villages, you idiot, she fumed. You're going to have to do that when you're Hokage too. What? I'll just do what Kakashi-sensei is doing and send my underlings to deal with all that. I don't need to do stuff like that. Sakura glared at him. You know what? You're right. I wouldn't want someone clumsy and stupid like you representing Konoha at these negotiations. It prompted another round of arguing between the two. Hinata hid her smile as she watched the two of them bickering. Some things never changed. After the two of them subsided, Naruto turned to Hinata and asked, You like the traveling, but do you like the missions? Hinata nodded and smiled at him, and the rest of the group who were all now looking at her. Yes, of course. It's interesting. When I first started, the Hokage and Shikamaru were worried about the Byakugan getting into enemy hands, but nobody really cares about my eyes. It's my ears they're more interested in. She grinned at them. All I do is listen. People just want to have someone listen to their problems. Oh, Hinata, Sakura said with a sigh. You're a saint. I wouldn't be able to do that. Ino chuckled. Yes, we know. Ino, Sakura said as she reached behind Naruto's back with her chopsticks in a motion to stab her, but she knocked into him too hard that he almost planted his hands on the flaming grill in front of him. Sakura, he yelled in protest. You almost barbecued my hands. Knock it off. Sakura gasped. Sorry, Naruto. Still grumbling, Naruto glared at her. Ino batted her eyes teasingly at Sakura and grinned, but she laid a hand on Naruto's arm and said, Sorry, Naruto. That was really dangerous, and it was my fault. Humph, he said. And you guys were the ones who wanted to eat here. I told you we should have gone to Ichiraku. But this way, we get to see each other face to face, instead of sitting at the counter, right? Hinata quickly said, trying to dispel the tension. He smiled at her, forgetting his ire at the two women sitting next to him. Yeah. Sakura and Ino smiled at her with an annoying look. Hinata then realized the meaning of her words too late. It sounded like she just spent the entire evening staring at him, which she had done. She flushed guiltily. Ino laughed at her, turned to Naruto, then said, Naruto, you okay traveling everywhere by yourself? Since our last mission together, you've been alone most of the time. She picked up some of the cooked meat from the grill, placed it on a plate and handed it to Sai, who was sitting across from her. Hinata caught the surreptitious way Ino's fingers brushed his as she handed Sai the plate she'd filled with food. The smile they shared was sweet. Oh wow, Hinata thought with a spurt of happiness. How nice for them. Yeah, it's good, Naruto said as he chewed his food and missed all the subtle things happening around him. I talk to people most of the time, but getting everyone to agree is hard. Sometimes, though, it makes me doubt whether I really want to be Hokage if I have to deal with bickering people all the time. Hinata gasped. He looked at her worried face and said with his usual grin, No. I didn't say I wasn't going to completely give up on that dream. I said it's a lot harder than I thought it would be. She looked relieved and then nodded. She suddenly broke eye contact, picked up her own plate, and started eating. She didn't want to be the focus of his attention. Didn't you travel with Jiraiya-sama, though? Sakura asked with a frown. You know what, you never mentioned anything about it at all. Yeah, but we didn't really leave Konoha land, Naruto said as he picked up the plate in front of him, inspecting the burnt meat Sakura had placed on it. He gave her a frowning sideways glance, then tossed it back into the fire. Plus, we spent most of our time at Onsen's because he had all his research to do for his stupid books. But I did train and worked on my Rasengan and fighting skills, so it's different from what I'm doing now. I'm mostly trying to just get people to talk to each other, getting to the root of the problems, and seeing if we can come up with solutions. Hinata had kept her attention on him again, and his eyes met hers across the table when he looked up. He'd caught her looking. Oh, just like me then, she said. That's good, Naruto, so you're learning to negotiate too. Huh? Really? Naruto asked. Then he smiled, looking pleased. I guess I am then. Cool. Hinata felt everyone's approval and blushed. Naruto was looking particularly happy and kept smiling at her, which made her even more nervous. Arg. She suddenly panicked, quickly lowered her lashes, and picked up her chopsticks again. Her resolve to get stronger and confident around Naruto was wavering. Tonight, after not seeing him for a few months, she found his blue gaze too intense. She couldn't bear it. It was always up and down with her when it came to Naruto. One day she would be fine, the next she'd be a mess. It was enough to drive her crazy. It's fine. Just eat, she told herself, her eyes on her food. So everyone's doing okay then? Naruto asked after one more puzzled glance at Hinata's bowed head. He turned to Sai and Kiba sitting across from him. Kiba took a drink from his beer and sighed. Yeah, these missions are just making me feel like I've missed so much, just staying in Konoha. Did you know that there are so many other villages jutsus that mesh so well when working with dogs? I didn't realize there were that many. Akamaru's been on cloud 9 since we started. They nodded. Hinata turned her attention away from Naruto. She leaned in forward, looked right past Kiba, and addressed Sai. How are your missions, Sai? Sai leaned in, too, past Kiba sitting between them and met her gaze with a friendly smile. Mine's been good. I wanted to do ANBU and covert missions, but Shikamaru said I should focus on something else. Naruto's grin was full of teasing. What, you mean they didn't want you doing secret, undercover stuff? No, Sai answered truthfully. I'm working more closely with people, doing the same things I've been doing here in Konoha, but just in different villages. I'm around lots of people. They said I needed to work on my social skills. Social skills? Naruto chortled with glee. That's a good one. 'Cause you're so awkward and bungling and so ungraceful. 'Cause you're just so embarrassing, Sai. Ha! But he stopped laughing when he realized nobody else was sharing the joke. I think you're talking about you, Naruto, Sakura said. Hinata chuckled. She loved being out of Konoha, but sometimes it was good to be home, too. Chapter 10, Working Girl. Months later, launching herself wholeheartedly into this new pattern of life, Hinata finally hit her stride. It was through these diplomatic missions that Hinata found her true calling. They were the perfect outlet for her quiet nature. She ultimately discovered that gentleness had a place in the world of the shinobi, after all, that it was a strength of its own. This was power that only she possessed, that even her cousin Niji had, to be honest, ignored. He'd been her ally in finding strength, but they'd only focused on physical and mental strength. They had never explored her gentle nature. As always, her sweetness had been treated as a weakness, something that needed to be crushed out of her, or changed and molded to suit others' needs. Hyugas were raised to be proud, to believe that they were the best of the best, but Hinata had never believed that for herself and had sensed how different she was from the rest of her clan. She just lacked the hardness and harshness of the Hyugas. This realization had robbed her of the ability to speak up and to assert herself against the overwhelming force of her family. But as she traveled out of Konoha and explored, she came to understand that she could use her gentleness to ease the burden others felt, to make others feel comfortable enough to talk. She slowly gained belief in herself and her skills as a diplomat. As she listened to others, she'd found herself talking more easily to people, getting over the shyness that always pervaded her. The more Hinata listened, the easier it became to gather her thoughts and ask questions that made people want to talk more. It forced her to get over her natural timidity, to pay attention to what people really wanted to talk about, giving her the confidence to skillfully maneuver around complicated issues calmly. Her experience dealing with the prickly pride of the Hyuga clan had also given her the necessary skills to soothe the ruffled feathers of angry, pompous people. Young, old, male, female, rich, and poor had found her peaceful, quiet presence comforting. She was so easy to talk to, and they truly appreciated the air of caring that always surrounded her as she listened with genuine sympathy and concern. She was also easy on the eyes. Kakashi and Shikamaru, both cagey and politically adept, had taken advantage of the fact and had used her delicate beauty to represent Konoha in difficult situations. Of course, they were careful to hide the fact from Hinata, whose open nature would probably have balked at knowing she was being used in such a way. They noticed the hush that gripped the crowd when she'd enter a room, or the admiring glances that usually men, the village leaders, the daimyos, and their sons, often sent her way. She, meanwhile, remained blind to it all. Thank God she's still firmly in love with Naruto, Shikamaru thought, as he took another drink from the tray. Otherwise, they wouldn't have been able to pull off these things. They were at Sunna, waiting for Gaara to appear with his siblings, the hosts for this particular event. Shikamaru and Hinata had been assigned on one of these trips that Kakashi had insisted they take to promote more peaceful relations, though Shikamaru didn't think it was necessary to keep promoting peace with an already established ally. But hey, he wasn't going to complain. Even though it was a pain in the ass to get here, he liked coming to Sunna for a visit. Unbeknownst to Shikamaru, Naruto had also arrived at the sand. He was waiting in a room that Baki had sent him to. He hadn't realized that he'd been rude in just simply arriving without sending word to Gaara first. He shook his head. He should have asked Kurama to send word through the one-tailed Shikaku, who could have relayed the message to Gaara, giving him advanced warning of his arrival. Now he'd placed all of them in an awkward position. It had been on a whim, this visit to Sunna. He'd been in the area, helping a smaller village that bordered the Kazekage's land. The village was poor, and seeing the people living in such conditions had made Naruto realize the differences between Konoha and other lands. It made sense now why some people found it so hard to let go of bitterness when they lived in situations where they felt helpless. Again, it was another issue he tacked to the back of his mind, something he needed to think about when it became time to lead people. For now, all he could do was offer encouragement to people obviously struggling. He made the villagers realize that sometimes, changing something small, something within their control, was enough to change their fate, or more importantly, change their mindset. But he discovered that even in such a short time in their presence, being available to help was enough for most people. After that, since he'd been close, he wanted to stop by in Sunna for a quick visit before heading back home again to Konoha. He wanted to see his friend again. Baki, Gaara's advisor, had looked at him speculatively but hadn't said anything. If you can wait here, the Kazekage will probably let you know. Let me know what? Naruto thought, frowning. But a few minutes later, Gaara walked in, his hand outstretched and a smile of greeting on his face. Naruto! This is a surprise, but I'm happy to see you, the Kazekage said, his voice warm with welcome. Gaara! Naruto grinned. His hands were in his pockets, but he'd forgotten that Gaara was a handshaker. He took out both hands, walked up to him, and pumped the Kazekage's hand a little too enthusiastically, which made them both laugh. Welcome back to Sunna, Naruto, Gaara said. There's a celebration tonight. Would you like to join us? There are people here from Konoha who'd be happy to see you. Shikamaru is here. And so is Hinata Hyuga. Hinata! Naruto said, startled to hear the name. Shikamaru, he could understand, since he was the Hokage's right-hand man, but Hinata was a pleasant surprise. And he remembered that she was traveling outside of Konoha working for the Hokage. That's right. She was also on diplomatic missions. Yo, Naruto Uzumaki! Kankuro said with a smile as he walked into the room, Temari at his side. Famous hero from the Great War. Why are you here in the sand? And how come you didn't come with the rest of the Hokage's emissaries? I didn't know they were going to be here, Naruto said. But now I really want to see them. Not in those clothes, you're not, Temari said coolly, looking at Naruto's mud-splattered mission gear. This is a celebration. We've just had a grueling session and finally hammered out the agreements. This is a solemn event. You're going to have to change. What? Naruto tried to protest. How about we have it cleaned instead? Gaara said. Temari glared at him. She had no choice but to agree with her younger brother. A few minutes later, they all walked into the formal ballroom with a lot of fanfare. Naruto was touted as the guest of honor. Women glanced at him admiringly, and he blushed to be at the focus of everyone's attention. He was starting to enjoy some of it until he heard Kankuro say, "Wow," in a blatantly admiring voice. He followed his gaze and saw Hinata in the corner of the room talking to a crowd. She was wearing a dark blue kimono with a silver obi wrapped around her waist, her hair swept up and pinned to the back. It was a simple outfit, but the way she carried herself made her look elegant and polished. There was a light tint of crimson on her cheeks, and her lips gleamed pink under the lights. Her eyes were brilliantly smiling at all of them, particularly at the tall brown-haired man standing next to her. Wow, Naruto thought as well, as he gazed at her. Is that Hinata? He asked in disbelief. He couldn't believe it. Yes, it is, a voice said beside him, and Naruto found Shikamaru grinning into his face. She looks so different, Naruto said distractedly. She looks beautiful, Kankuro completed Naruto's sentence with a sly grin. She looks amazing, desirable, and ravishing. Naruto frowned at him. He didn't like the way Kankuro was looking at Hinata. He was about to head in her direction to say hello, but Shikamaru held him back. No, don't bother her right now. She's working, he said with a hard edge to his voice. Working? Naruto said incredulously as he turned to his friend. What do you mean? Shikamaru sighed. You pain in the ass. I hate explaining these things to you because you just don't get subtlety. He pointed to the tall man with brown hair and a diamond stud in one ear standing next to her. The man was looking down at Hinata, an arm held loosely around her waist. She was trying to subtly avoid that grasping arm. Naruto hated seeing her so unprotected. That's the Fire Country Daimyo's son. The Hokage, Hinata, and I are trying to get money to help the families of the shinobi who've died during the war. Money's running out and we need more support. We've been trying to get more from the daimyo, but he's been stubbornly avoiding us. I tried to use my connections as Asuma's disciple to get an audience with the daimyo, but he's been hiding. So now we're trying a different tact. She's trying to get the son to agree to some of our demands. Naruto understood the reasoning, but he didn't like the way the man was looming over Hinata. Yeah, but... Shikamaru looked at him disbelievingly. Do you honestly think Hinata needs your protection from a civilian? She can easily kill the guy. Watch her and see how she can use something gentler to disarm him. Naruto watched, still seething with resentment. From afar, he watched as Hinata continued smiling up at the daimyo's son, who was able to finally put his hand on her waist. She put her hand over his and patted it. She said something that changed the man's expression from flirting to almost sadness. The man continued talking and Hinata's face turned consoling as she nodded with understanding. She patted the man on the arm again, and then she reached up and hugged him. Actually hugged him. Naruto thought with disgust. The daimyo's son looked at her with a glazed expression, and she murmured something that made the man smile. He bowed to her as he released her waist, grabbed a hand, and pressed a chaste kiss on her fingers. Naruto ground his teeth. He glared at Shikamaru beside him, who ignored him and instead was smiling broadly at Hinata. Really? Naruto thought in disbelief. This was working? Hinata bowed to the man and glided towards where Shikamaru and Naruto were standing. Without sparing a glance at Naruto, she headed straight for Shikamaru, her gaze locked on his. She was excited, but she kept her expression neutral. Her eyes, though, shone with happiness and satisfaction. She was a foot away from them when she reached out her hand and grabbed Shikamaru's arm. The movement looked refined and graceful, but Shikamaru knew how excited she was by the strength of her grip. Her face broke out into a jubilant smile. "Oh, Shikamaru," she whispered in a breathy, husky voice. "We got it!" Shikamaru, normally so lax and lazy-looking, actually flushed a little bit and grinned at her. "I knew you could do it." "Hi, Hinata," Naruto said with a spurt of irritation. He shot a peeved glance at the both of them. Did she really need to say Shikamaru's name in that tone? It was so annoying. As if she just realized he'd been standing there, she turned to Naruto with surprise. "Naruto!" Naruto swallowed the indignation he felt when she'd completely ignored him. But before he could even say something, somebody came and swept her away. This time, an older gentleman came to talk to her, and Hinata made her excuses as she was led away. She turned to her fellow Konoha shinobi and said, "I'll talk to you guys later." Kankuro suddenly sighed and sniffed the air where she'd just been. "She even smells nice." He looked at the two of them and said, "Wow, what's wrong with you Konoha guys? How is it that a woman like that is still available and running loose, away from your village?" Shikamaru resisted the urge to look at Naruto. "Not guys, only one guy." Instead, he turned to Temari and said, "You look nice." "Can't say the same about you," came her reply. Chapter 11: The Balcony. Hinata took a deep breath as she stood outside. She just needed to cool down. She'd been talking to so many people today, she just wanted a chance to take a break and find some peace of mind. And to calm herself before she could face Naruto again. Oh, she'd known he'd been in the room. There was no way she could have missed him, so golden and bright. She'd seen the admiring glances that a lot of men, and mostly women, sent his way. But she'd been so filled with pride for her efforts that she'd forgotten his existence. This was growth, she thought with amusement. She'd been able to dismiss him from her mind as she'd enjoyed her success. She, quiet Hinata, had accomplished something that even the supremely capable Shikamaru hadn't been able to do. It had made her happy enough to forget the existence of the love of her life. Hinata was proud of herself. She'd been able to convince the daimyo's son to increase more support for the Shinobi Widows Fund. She would be able to go home to Konoha feeling she'd done some good. She felt the sudden prickle in her consciousness and gave a low laugh. Growth, indeed? He'd followed her outside. Hinata could feel her heart beating faster. They were alone, she realized. She felt a sudden wave of anxiety flow through her. She'd lost the safety of the crowd, the protective embrace of knowing what to do when she was around other people. She always floundered when she was around Naruto, especially when it was just the two of them, at night, under the stars, outside on a balcony. The romance of it was too much to bear. She didn't turn around but felt him walking towards her. She wanted to fall back on her nervous tick, to focus her breath as she tapped her index fingers together, but she resisted. Maybe she'll do it after she was done talking to him, she suddenly thought with a smile. Then she laughed at herself for being so stupid. He probably had no thought of romance whatsoever in his mind. Okay, he was just a friend. They were just going to chat. Just talking. With a friend. Who she'd been in love with for years. Hinata finally turned around and watched as he approached her slowly. Growth, ha! She thought with sudden alarm as she felt herself getting warmer the closer he got to her. That growth sure was short-lived. She willed herself not to panic, to calm down. She kept her eyes on him, watching him walk towards her, fighting to keep her composure even as her heart pounded and drunk in her first sight of him in months. God, Hinata loved how he looked in that uniform, the dark top and the orange pants. It fit him well, emphasizing the way he moved with more precision and smoothness. When you've managed to save the world at 17, you just gain confidence in your abilities. It showed. At 19, Naruto walked with ease and comfort, strides long, arms swinging casually at his sides, face forward towards a goal he was forever chasing. He vibrated with energy, knowing there was nothing he couldn't do. He had a tall, wiry frame that belied muscles formed from endless hours of physical training. His drive to become the next Hokage meant that he was forever pushing himself to reach, and even go beyond his limits. But she'd always found him handsome, and her fingers itched to skim over his body and feel those lean muscles under her skin. to run her hands through his short, golden hair. One of these days. He was closer now, and the heat off him was too intense for her. Hinata swallowed. Okay. Here we go. Talk to him. He's a friend. Be normal. Naruto, she said at his approach. Hey, Hinata. And she was falling again, forever falling. He stopped in front of her, staring with a slight frown on his face, his curious blue eyes flitting over her cheeks, and the pink sheen of her lips. I didn't recognize you, he said. It is you, isn't it? She suddenly laughed, feeling less tense. Of course. You look nice, he said with a flush. I didn't recognize you until Shikamaru pointed you out to me. You look so different. In a kimono. She smiled as calmly as she could, but her heart was skipping every other beat. Damn, she thought. A compliment, from Naruto. It was a good thing he hadn't noticed the rapid pulse at her neck. He finally laughed, and Hinata felt the tension draining out of her when she heard the familiar sound. He was normal, then she could be, too. It's been a while, Hinata. I haven't seen you since we were all having dinner that one time in Yakiniku. She nodded. Yes, it's been a while. I've been back to the village and traveling back out again. Same with you, I think. We just haven't had the chance to run into each other in town again. But it's good to see each other out of Konoha sometimes, isn't it? He smiled. Yeah. Not sure about you, but I like it. When you're far away from home, you feel like another person. He slanted his head to the side, glancing once more at her kimono and then back to her hair. I guess, but I think it's more for others. Just me, then? She said with another secret smile. Of course. Naruto was recognizable everywhere he went. He wouldn't be able to feel anonymity. Hinata, he said suddenly as he reached forward and brushed at the hair on her forehead. His fingers touched her lightly at the top of her head. Something's sticking up from your hair. Surprised, she reached up and touched her head where his fingers lingered. Hers brushed his, sending a thrill she felt all the way to her toes. She smiled at him as his hand lowered. One of her hairpins had come loose. She found it and pushed it down, then patted her hair in place. All the while, he watched her in silence. Thank you, she said. Hinata was about to say something when she saw a movement at the corner of her eyes. She saw through the glass doors that somebody was heading for them. One of her admirers who'd latched onto her throughout her entire time here in Sunna was approaching them with drinks in his hand. Oh no, she thought. She had to do something about him. He was still far away. Hinata glanced at Naruto and realized he could help her. She was going to regret this, but she had a duty to perform. Her heart pounded painfully in her chest. Oh God, she thought in fear. But she gathered her courage. She needed to do this. This was for Konoha, for the Hokage. Plus, she could kill two birds with one stone. Ah. Naruto, I need you. I'm sorry, I don't have time to explain right now, but I'm going to use you for a second. Just go with the flow, okay? She suddenly said. Then Hinata grabbed his arm, slung it around her shoulder, leaned her body into his front, and wrapped both of her arms around his torso. Naruto, I need you. The words flowed through his mind first, but they suddenly disappeared as Naruto felt himself engulfed in all kinds of heat. Her abrupt assault on him had left him unprepared to deal with the fire coursing through his body. His face flushed red, and his collar felt tight around his neck. The pit of his stomach burned fiercely, and he felt his lungs seizing up. He was having trouble breathing. Hinata had wrapped her arms around his stomach and was looking up at him, a sweet smile on her face. Her mouth was moving, but he couldn't make out what she was saying. Despite the layers of clothing from his uniform and her kimono, he could feel the warmth of her body pressed against his chest, and something soft that made him want to melt. It felt delicious and heavenly, making him sweat. Wait, was that a breast pressing against him? No, it was two breasts. Hinata had breasts. He swallowed. Wow. His hands suddenly felt clammy. He felt dizzy. She was whispering, her voice low, and he couldn't hear her, so he leaned in closer to catch her words, but he found her breath fanning against his ear, his neck, which made him uncomfortably warm again. Either that, or give up entirely and die, and just let her brush his skin with her breath. Do this, she was saying, but he was having trouble following the conversation. Kankuro was right, he thought, as he breathed in her scent. She did smell nice, like apples and cinnamon. Again, he felt the burning in his stomach and his hands unconsciously pressed her closer to his body. She was still talking low, and he finally understood what she was saying. Just follow my lead. You don't have to say anything. She leaned closer into his form and tilted her head up, smiled again at him, her expression composed, while here he was panting and losing breath, still feeling intoxicated. Please don't frown. He didn't realize he had been. He kept his gaze on her lips. They were pink and glistening, and still moving. Do you think you can smile at me? Unconsciously, he did, lips stretching, following whatever orders she was giving him. Here he comes. And Naruto distinctly heard a male voice say, "Oh, Hinata. Sorry. I thought you were alone." It was dripping with disappointment. Naruto stiffened at the sound, turned around with a glare, and said, "Yeah, obviously." Hinata pressed a hand to his back as a warning. Still whispering low, still with the smile on her face, she said, "No, don't antagonize him. We need him. He's from IWA. He's an advisor to Inoki Tsuchikage." Instead, she slowly turned her head away from his face, smiled at the man, and calmly said, "Lord Ruma. I didn't hear you. Was there something in particular you need?" She was still holding on to Naruto's arm, still pressed to his side. Her other arm was still at his back. He resisted the urge to sniff her hair as it tickled him on the chin. "I'm sorry, Hinata. I didn't think there was anybody here with you." The man glanced at Naruto, then at Hinata's arms wrapped around him. She slanted Naruto a smile that made him want to melt into puddles at her feet, then glanced back at the man. "Lord Ruma, this is Naruto Uzumaki, an old friend. We were just catching up. I haven't seen him for a long time. I know you mentioned that you would love to meet him." "Naruto Uzumaki," the man said with an admiring glance. He came forward and Hinata dropped Naruto's arms as she slowly extricated herself from his embrace. Naruto suddenly felt like crying, feeling the loss of her warmth. Still smiling, she turned to Naruto. In a soft voice she said, "Naruto, Lord Roma would love to talk to you about your exploits during the war. He's working with Lady Kuratsuchi on improving their shinobi training. Do you think you guys could talk about it?" He looked at the Lord's face, firmly staring at him, his eyes away from Hinata's face. That's good, at least. He would rather the man look at him than gaze at Hinata with that look of admiration he was starting to hate. She, meanwhile, had nodded at him, and her eyes were pleading with him to take the hint. Sure, he said, although in his heart, he really wanted to talk to her instead. "Naruto, I need you." "Lord Ruma," he said as he extended a hand in greeting. The smile she turned on Naruto was blinding. Lord Ruma was shaking his hand, soon launching into an enthusiastic description of IWA fighting tactics. Naruto kept up the conversation as the three of them stood on the balcony. Soon, Gaara came to find them as he paused at the entrance to the balcony. As soon as she saw him, Hinata touched both men's arms and excused herself. "The Kazekage should not be kept waiting," she said. She strode toward Gaara with a wide, open smile on her face. He, too, was smiling at her. Naruto watched as the two of them spoke to each other, an air of familiarity enveloping them. Wait. When did that happen? His mind was screaming. He kept half of his attention on the IWA advisor even as he watched Gaara and Hinata laughing together. He felt like he was being kept out of the loop somehow. He wanted to join them instead of talking to this guy he had never met. But Hinata's words were clear, "I need you." So instead, he sighed inwardly. "Yeah, definitely," he said in answer to Ruma's question. "Exactly as the Tsuchikage described it to you. Kurama can transfer chakra through me into everyone I touch. He's behaving remarkably well." "What did you tell him?" Gaara asked Hinata, which made both of them laugh. "Lord Ruma's a fan, so Naruto doesn't want to offend him, I think," Hinata said. Her voice was calm, but she was still shaking inside. God, he'd felt so good when she'd wrapped her arms around him. The warmth of him, his solid, steady presence so calming. All the while she had done it, she'd kept a refrain in her head: he's a friend. He's a friend. Just a friend. Repeating the phrase had helped her keep her cool, to keep thinking clearly about the mission, but she was still honest enough to admit that she had enjoyed every single minute of it. Even as she died with the embarrassment of it all, knowing it was so out of character for her, she'd continued to shamelessly press herself against his body. Hinata was only glad the darkness had hidden her uneasiness. But it was one memory she could keep in her heart. She hadn't expected to, but she'd loved Naruto's scent as she'd breathed him in. And she noticed the way he'd unconsciously tightened his arms around her waist when Lord Ruma had approached them and had started speaking. It had taken all her willpower to keep up the act, to keep smiling at him when all she'd wanted to do was lay her cheek against his chest and just ask him to continue holding her. But she was still working, and she'd kept her head. Lord Ruma was one of the people Kakashi and Shikamaru had asked her to cultivate a friendship with. Ruma was a businessman with contacts in all the other villages. He was also smart, with cutting-edge ideas about shinobi tactics and strategies. They needed him, potentially as support for Konoha's future. Luckily, he was also an admirer of Naruto, which was why Hinata had purposefully encouraged both of them to talk. As she'd suspected, Ruma's interest in her was fleeting. She'd watched with satisfaction as his admiration for her died when he'd seen the way Naruto's arms had been around her body. But Ruma's interest in Naruto and the beast he carried within him was infinite. She was glad they were still talking. Naruto had heeded her plea, and he'd done his duty. Hinata turned back to the Kazekage hoping to set him at ease, but she needn't have worried. Gaara's normally stiff and polite demeanor was not evident. In the days she'd been in Sunna, they found that they had compatible personalities. They both enjoyed being quiet, and he'd found that he didn't need to talk so much when he was around her. She understood his need to think and to gather his thoughts before speaking. He watched her smile at Naruto. "Should we go get them?" She continued looking at the two men and nodded. "Yes, I think we should all go back now. Everyone will be wondering where we are. And I know they all want to see you, Kazekage-sama." "Hinata," he said with slight reproof. She laughed and shook her head at him. "I can't call you simply by your first name," she said. "No matter how much you insist." He smiled at her. "Yet you can call a future Hokage by his first name." She blushed. "That's different." "So it would seem." Chapter 12: The Sand Siblings. Naruto slept fitfully that night, dreaming of warm things pressing against his chest. He woke up groggily, but the sun was already out in full. He had to hurry. Today, Gaara was taking all of the Konoha shinobi out to tour his village and the work they were doing around the countryside. He was looking forward to spending time with everyone. After his talk with Ruma last night, they'd gone back to the hall and he'd lost the chance to speak with any of the people he knew. They had all been scattered throughout the room. Hinata's attention had been immediately claimed by other people. Shikamaru had to talk to everyone who had questions about Konoha. Gaara had his duty as Kazekage, his siblings the same. Out on his own, talking to so many people in the room, Naruto had to deal with the usual hero worship he met everywhere he went. Truthfully, he was tired of the constant adoration. It still reminded him of the time after his fight with Pain, of the sudden shift of people's perceptions of him, when he'd gone from being hated to being loved. Times like these, he always found himself flustered and uneasy, never knowing the truth. It made him question whether people's feelings towards him were sincere or not. But it was probably one of those things he would need to figure out when he eventually became Hokage. Damn Kakashi-sensei and his foresight! The current Hokage knew exactly what he'd been planning when he'd scattered him and his friends all over the planet. Naruto sighed. Again, achieving his dream was a lot more difficult than he'd imagined it would be. But there were no shortcuts to life and to being Hokage, so he would just have to learn to do it. However, he began to appreciate it more when people took him for what he was and not some godlike creature to be worshipped. And one of those people who knew his character so well and did not worship him whatsoever was coming at him with a scowl on his face. "You're late, you pain in the ass." Naruto muzzled his protest when he saw that everyone was already gathered. Hinata was waiting with a smile on her face. Gaara was there with his brother and sister. Temari had a hand on her hip and was tapping her fingers impatiently against her thigh. "Don't ever keep us waiting again," she said. Naruto felt a jolt. "Yes, ma'am." Shikamaru snorted with a laugh. Temari pierced him with her green eyes. "Shikamaru, I'm holding you responsible for his behavior. He's part of your group." Naruto swallowed his laughter as Shikamaru sputtered, then turned to him with an evil glare. "See, you're such a pain in the ass. Causing me trouble even though it wasn't my fault." Hinata grinned, but she said, "Good morning, Naruto." He smiled at her, relieved that there was at least one friendly face in his corner this morning. They all left and started walking towards the outer gates of Sunna. Naruto got to see Gaara in action as Kazekage and found that all his people treated him with respect and devotion. He felt happy, seeing his friend regarded so well. He hoped someday he would be able to experience the same thing in Konoha. When he'd first met Gaara years ago, there had been such intense hate in his eyes, but Naruto took solace in the hope that if Gaara could change even after living within the darkness for so long, then others could do the same. Sometimes it only took time. Sometimes it took another person to just recognize the pain and give a damn. Naruto looked back and saw that Kankuro had fallen into step with Hinata and was flirting with her. She was nodding, her eyes gleaming with amusement at something he said. He jogged back to join them. "If you could, I'd really appreciate it," she was saying. "Two would be nice. But if you could spare more, I'd be your best friend." Kankuro whistled. "I'm going to try to get you 10 then, because I'd like to be more than that." The hell? Naruto thought, not liking this conversation at all. What were they talking about? But the two of them started giggling, and just like last night, Naruto felt like he was out of the loop somehow. Why was everyone suddenly fawning all over Hinata? Had she changed that much? He glanced surreptitiously at her. She'd gotten rid of her old, baggy, white and purple uniform. She was dressed now in the newer one, a more form-fitting type that she'd gotten just a year ago. Sure, it was different, and he could clearly see the outline of her body. Okay, maybe more than the outline, as he remembered that Hinata had really nice, soft breasts. He flushed just as the two of them looked at him. "Naruto, you okay?" Kankuro asked with a grin. He'd caught him looking at Hinata's chest, and he could guess the direction of his thoughts. Hinata was looking concerned. "If you're feeling hot, maybe you should take off your jacket?" "No, I'm fine," Naruto almost shouted. The last thing he needed was fewer layers of clothing between the two of them. He was going to hold on to his jacket even if it killed him. He looked at Kankuro. "What are you getting her?" Kankuro laughed. "Your emissary is so bloodthirsty, she wants knives." "Knives?" Naruto gasped. "Kankuro-sama," Hinata said reproachfully. "I wish you wouldn't put it like that." Gaara's older brother only chuckled. She pursed her lips in a little disapproving frown, but she shook her head with a slight smile. She explained, "I was hoping he'd be able to get me some of the surgical knives that Sakura had mentioned a few months back. I wanted to get her an Ino, and maybe some of the medical corps, a few of them if it helps them do their work." "I'm just kidding, Hinata. As our guest here in Sunna, I'd be happy to get them for you," Kankuro said. He chucked her on the chin. The smile she flashed at him was ecstatic. "Really? Thank you?" Kankuro's smile turned sly. "You owe me payment, though. I want a kiss." Naruto bristled. Shit. This was not what he wanted to see so early in the morning. And Hinata? Why was she allowing all this touching from Kankuro? He was quickly discovering that he hated it when Hinata ignored him. But Hinata stared at Kankuro, peered into his eyes, weighed his words, the sincerity and truth behind them. His smile lost its flirty vibe, and she must have believed him because she leaned up to kiss Kankuro on the cheek. 10 surgical knives. I'll hold you to that promise, Kankuro-sama. And Naruto lost it. You can't just go around kissing guys like that, Hinata! He yelled. He grabbed her arm and dragged her away from Kankuro and everyone else. Kankuro left them alone and started walking forward, whistling. Hinata pulled back, though, dug her heels in, and simply looked at him with a puzzled look. It wasn't a kiss. He glared at her. It was. She shook her head at him. It was a peck on the cheek. That's it. Nothing else. Hinata, your lips were on his skin. It was a kiss. He didn't know why he couldn't let it go. She stepped closer to him, looked him in the eyes. Naruto, are you okay? Why are you so worked up about it? Her voice was soft. I guess because Kankuro's here, you don't need me today, he yelled. It came out more accusing than he'd intended. The hurt behind his words surprised both of them. Did he really just say that? He looked at her in complete shock. Embarrassment made him flush. She drew back in surprise and then she paled. Oh, Naruto, I'm so sorry. She then reached out and placed a hand in the middle of his chest. At her touch, he suddenly found himself tongue-tied. He forgot what they were arguing about. Hinata stepped closer. Naruto, you're right. I forgot to apologize to you for using you so shamelessly yesterday. I didn't even say thank you for helping me out. Tears of guilt were welling in her eyes, and Naruto suddenly felt like the biggest asshole in the world. Hinata, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to say that. You did nothing wrong. He searched frantically in his pockets. He located a handkerchief somewhere in his uniform and handed it to her. The warmth of her hand on his chest disappeared as it fell away when she'd accepted his handkerchief. Come back, hand, he wanted to say. But he waited for her to help him finish this conversation because he didn't know how else to continue. He was being an ass and didn't know how to get out of this situation with good grace. Thank you, Naruto, she said. She dabbed at her eyes. I really am sorry about last night. I basically manhandled you and you were so kind to help me deal with Lord Ruma. Will you forgive me for using you? It was really selfish of me. She was looking at him, her lavender eyes filled with so much sorrow and remorse. Naruto wanted to sink down into the earth and die. Even Kurama was affected. Nice job, jerk, came the low snarl from the beast. He dropped down to his knees, planted his hands on the ground, and bowed his head until his forehead protector was touching the soil. This was all he could think to do. I'm sorry. Hinata, please don't look at me like that. I'm an ass. I'm a jerk. I'm dirt. I'm shit. I'm whatever you can think of right now that you need to stomp on and crush to the ground. Her startled laughter made his heart melt with relief, and he glanced up to see her reaching to pull him up from his crouching position. Oh, Naruto, she said, the smile back on her face. Her hand was on his arm as he stood up. You did nothing wrong. I'm sorry you felt used last night. He shook his head. No, you needed me and asked for my help. I wanted to help you last night. I'm sorry for getting mad at you for Kankuro. I shouldn't have yelled at you. There was a rueful smile and a shake of her head. I want to apologize again, but we're not going anywhere with this. Can we just say that we're good? Okay. He agreed vehemently, and was glad when she nodded and gave him a sideways look filled with relief. Hurry up, you two. Don't make Gaara wait. Temari's angry voice suddenly called out. Then she added, Shikamaru. Get your people in check. Damn it. Naruto. Came Shikamaru's disgruntled voice. I'm so sorry, Temari-sama. Hinata replied as she glanced at them, a few yards away. She smiled at Naruto. We better go. She's ready to pop a blood vessel. They ran as quickly as they could and joined the group. For the next 3 days, Naruto, Shikamaru, and Hinata entered the world of Sunna politics. They saw the ways the Kazekage worked with his council and advisors, the way he treated the people he had under his care. They also managed to do a little bit of shinobi training as everyone in Sunna came to watch Hinata show off her Byakugan and Taijutsu skills. Shikamaru also demonstrated the Nara clan's shadowbinding techniques to an audience. Naruto, meanwhile, attracted everyone's attention because of his Nine-Tails power and his Rasengan. He loved that some of the older warriors had remembered seeing the fourth Hokage using the same wind techniques. He was able to hear their stories and felt closer to his father after hearing about Minato's exploits even this far away from Konoha. It reminded him again how small and how connected their world was. Hinata, when not working, found herself hiding away from Naruto. She'd found that his outburst the day after the party had shaken her more than she wanted to admit. Why had he been so angry with Kankuro's flirting? It didn't make sense, unless he was jealous of the Kazekage's older brother. But that would mean that Naruto would have at least some feelings for her to even feel something that strong. She shook her head. No, she told herself with determination. It was all wishful thinking on her part. She tamped down all the feelings of hope that rose in her, which she found hard every time she saw him and he smiled at her, completely normal. He never mentioned it again. They both decided to ignore his outburst and tried their best to pretend that it didn't happen. And so the three Konoha shinobi found themselves heading home after the success they had in Sunna. Hinata was grinning. In her arms, she carried a box filled with surgical knives. Kankuro had come through and given her 20 of them. As soon as they got to the gates, though, Hinata's clan members greeted her with news that the Hyugas needed her to deal with some business that she was in charge of. She sighed, but she knew her duty. Hinata turned to Naruto and Shikamaru. I have to go. I'll see you guys, she said with a wave. That's it for part 2. Thank you for watching and see you in the next video.